We are talking once again with Rabbi Leib Tropper. Today we're talking about the concept of pursuing Parnasa, making a livelihood, and learning Torah, which some people feel may be mutually exclusive. Others feel that it's the natural extension of what a person is mandated to do by the Torah. But many people are conflicted about exactly how to approach the idea of what is called Torah in Derech Eretz. Could you help us understand the notion of making Parnasa and the inclusivity of learning Torah or the exclusivity of it?
Wow, what a germane question. That is truly a germane question. In an era when shidduchim are decided upon vocation and not about personality, just, is he going to learn, is he going to work? If he's going to work, I want him. If he's going to learn, I don't want him. If he's going to learn, I do want him. If he's going to work, I don't want him. That kind of situation. And in general, the negative perspective that's carried on the shoulders of some of these Charedim B'nai Torah Yeshiva like that are kulam ahuvim kulam brum, they're wonderful, about people who are working, needs to be perhaps understood. Okay, so let's try to just analyze this properly in terms of what Rav Hirsch said. I'm not a Hirschian, basically, that's not my Messiah. I read many things about Rav Hirsch. I saw many things about Rav Hirsch. Harab Chaim Weiser called him the person who saved the Klal Yisrael. And Rav Hirsch was the author of this particular ism called Torah in Derech Eretzism. But it is questionable amongst his Talmidim what the Rebbe meant. Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal, if I'm quoting correctly, I know one of them doing the chelik of Madane Magoli Hashana, 4 volumes, the seasons of the year, talk about whether Rav Hirsch meant to say, try to save Germany by telling people in Germany, listen, you need to work to support your family, and you want to work to support your family, and that's your first concern, is to support your family. But learn Torah also. Don't forget, you must learn Torah to be identified as someone who believes in the Kehem Chayenu V'Orech Yameinu of Yiddishkeit. Or was he first saying, no, I believe in principle. To be a healthy Yid, there needs to be a merging of earning the Parnasa and spending time learning a little bit or a lot, whatever. But there has to be a merging of these two things in order to create a healthy Yiddishkeit. And there's much to say about that, about this concept of creating a healthy Yiddishkeit. In fact, the Rambam, if I remember correctly, Rambam and Pirush HaMishnayos in Perek Vav, where it talks about Kachi Darka Shel Torah, this is the way of Torah, and it talks about Mayim B'Melach Teichal, you should eat bread and salt, Mayim Mesura, water of a pitcher you should drink, Al Oretz Tishan, and you should sleep on the floor, V'Chaye Tzar Tich, you should live a life of tzar, of pain, U'Batorah Ata Omel, and be totally your work, your focus and toil should be in Torah. So Rambam says, if I remember correctly, he says it doesn't mean that one should choose that. It means that even if you all have to do that, you must learn Torah. Even if you have to have Chayit Tzar, even if you have to have Pasuk Melach Teichel, even then, but it's not a way to choose, it's that even if God gives you that in your lot of life, you should still be learning Torah as well. But that's not the preferred way. The preferred way is to earn the Parnasa and to learn Torah. And the Rambam seems to have done that in some way, right? The Rambam was the physician. He was many other things that he did, and he was private physician sultan in Egypt, and he saw people also privately. The other perspective is what needs explanation, and I want to share that with you. I mean, the common Litvish, Yeshivish, Haredi, Torah environment believes that, almost like what Baruch Ber says, what Chana Wasserman believes. What does Chana Wasserman believe? There is a concept that we said, the Gra writes in Peah, that Parnasa is a mitzvah. If Parnasa is a mitzvah, then the klolim, the rules of being a mitzvah should apply, that oisik b'mitzvah, potem and a mitzvah. While you're working, earning a living, you should be exempt from certain mitzvahs. I'm not sure if that people will say that applies. However, There was a fascinating discussion in the Svarim of Rabbi Chanan and Rabbi Baruch Ber, and Shuvas Kol Simcha, and many other Achronim, whether or not this concept of a person earns Parnasa, which is a mitzvah, as the Gemara says, is it an oinus, meaning is it extenuating circumstance that I have to support my wife? I have chiyuvik suba. I wrote a suba that I'm going to support my wife. I must support my children. You have to support your children. So I have extenuating circumstances. I have no choice. I have to go and stop learning full time. I have to go get a job. I have to be responsible. That's the overall message of the ksuba and everything else. Or is it a total exemption? I'm totally exempt of any Talmud Torah while I'm earning a parnasa. There can be many nafkaminas. One distinction, one practical distinction is somebody goes to work. And the Rabbi Chaim talks about it, and the B'ditchev talks about this in the Sefer, that I could sit there and think and learning while I'm working. If it's certain, manual labor, I could probably think learning. I could think about something else. But something that needs focus, you can't drive a bus thinking about something else. Al tirguzu b'derech. That's what Yaakov Avinu has told his children. You can't be oisik in a very difficult tzais hachoshin when you're driving in a very slippery road. You have to be al tirguzu b'derech. That's your job. So certain things eliminate the possibility of learning, even in machshava. So Rabbi Chanan would say, it's an ayinus, you can't do it. Rabbi Baruch would say, wait a minute, you're potter from, you don't have to find a way to excuse why you're not thinking and learning. While you're working, you're potter from Talmud Torah. Period. It's an exemption, total exemption. You don't need to think about learning while you're working, thinking about the computer, what you have to produce, what has to be printed, what has to be put away, what has to be emailed, what has to be faxed, what has to be scanned. You don't need to think about anything else. That's your time. You don't have to have a meeting. You have a little bit of time. You're working. This is your time that you dedicate from 9 to 5. You're dedicated to work. You're hired to work to 9 to 5, so you're putter from Talmud Torah during that time. That's a strong statement. Either one of them, the onus seems to imply that the working is kind of a secondary spot in Yiddishkeit to learning Torah. There are many words in the Torah that talk about that. That talk about that the working is not. Of course, it's not as important as learning Torah. For those who need parnasa, it's as important as learning Torah. Now, there are discussions in various achronim about this concept that the Gemara says in Brachas. The Shuvas Kol Simcha talks about this. I had a discussion yesterday on the phone with one of the poskim of Bnei Brak about this shaila. Gemara says in Brachas, Chishiv l'asais mitzvah, a person intended to do a mitzvah. V'ne'enas, under extenuating circumstances, he could not fulfill the mitzvah, he couldn't do it. Mala olav ha'kosav ki'ilu asa. The Torah considers it as if he has fulfilled that mitzvah. That's it. Tzedakah, I fulfilled it. Unfortunately, the hungry man didn't get his money, but I did a ma'aseh mitzvah. So, how do we Talmud Torah? How do we look at the Talmud? If I want to go to shul to learn, or to make medrash, or to see mecharusa, and then I get stomach cramps, I can't do it. So, assumingly, there's no reason to assume that they would not. This rule would not apply. Mm-hmm. You intended to do a mitzvah, and then Kosh Baruch Hu considers it as if you did the mitzvah. But there's a major difference with Talmud Torah. One is that the Ran in the Durham says that Talmud Torah has two aspects to it. One aspect is Limud HaTorah. Okay, that mitzvah is fulfilled. Chishev, even though he can't go, he cramps, he fulfilled the mitzvah. But the mitzvah of Yediyas HaTorah, which is also a second part, the Rav Shulchan Aruch passes that way, and also in Talmud Torah, Shulchan Aruch Rav, Baal Tanya, and the Ran in the Durham, as I mentioned. That part, you cannot have extenuating circumstance or whatever it may be. Say, Nenas, you were honest and you couldn't do the mitzvah, so it's like you did it. On that part, on actual mitzvah Talmud Torah, you could say that, but not on the part that you have to know Torah. And the third point is what this going, and Bnei Brak spoke to me yesterday about, was that famous Rabbi Chanan that he writes that I guess L'shitasa, it's consistent with his opinion that there are two parts, a third part of Talmud Torah. One other third part is that there are certain tikkunim, certain fixings in the world that happen through Talmud Torah that don't happen through any other mitzvah in the world. Certain tikkunim that happens, we see about it, whether it's Kabbalistic, whether it's in the Gemara. Torah is magni umatzli, the Gemara says. Torah protects person. This is not a zayir. There's a Torah, there's a Gemara site that says, Torah magni umatzli, be'idan the osik bei, uve'idan the loy osik bei. Means is while you are learning Torah and while you're not learning Torah, Torah protects you. Mitzvahs, ner mitzvah Torah or, mitzvahs is be'idan the osik bei, it's magni umatzli. While you're occupying the mitzvah, it protects you. But once you finish it, it doesn't protect you anymore. So there's a certain kind of thing that Torah has, a component that Torah has, a certain potency that it has, that you can't get because you had an extenuating circumstance. You're not making the fixing in the world. That fixing is not happening because you have that extenuating circumstance. So, as much as we can talk about that superiority of the concept of Torah, but that's only for the people who can. But those who have a chrayis of ksuba, chrayis of parnasa, etc., who need to go work, for them, the encomium is for going out and working. Their praises come with working, with doing diligent work, and as you said, integrity in the mitzvahs, so on and so forth. However, according to Rabbi Ber that says there's an exemption of Limud HaTorah completely, then it's not even a question to say the question of oines, what it accomplishes, it doesn't accomplish. It doesn't accomplish anything. You don't say chishav lasas mitzvah v'niya potter is like you did it. If somebody was about to do a mitzvah and he had extenuating circumstances, we say he's like he did it, right? But that's only a few extenuating circumstances. Let's say somebody becomes in the middle of the mitzvah, he becomes a shaitech hashem. He becomes mentally unable. So you're not going to say, well, God considers like as if he did it. He's part. He's not obligated. You can't say that God says he's like he did it because he's not obligated to do it. So if Baruch Ber learns that Parnasa is complete exemption, then it's not like I'd like to go work, but I have extenuating circumstances. Because Baruch considers it like as if you did it. It doesn't work that way, according to Baruch Ber, which is a fascinating concept in itself. This is only part one of what we're going to talk about regarding this issue. I do want to resume this issue at another time, but I wanted we to understand who we're talking about when we talk about Baruch Ber, Rabbi Chana. We're talking about not people who are arguing. And I think Baruch Ber is right. I mean, we're not even someone who can mix into a machlekes between these giants who Rabbi Chana was every minute of the day he was mamish willing to die for Torah, and he ultimately died like Kiddush Shem Shemayim, and he prepared himself. He said we shouldn't have any machshavas zaros when the Nazis are going to kill us. I mean, we don't know much rega that we could think of instead of having tainus to the Bari Olam. He was totally pure. We shouldn't have machshavas zaros in our mind when we go and get killed by the Nazis. Nobody knows where Rabbi Chanan is buried. Rabbi Chanan was prepared to do everything it takes to be Kaddish Shem Shemayim. Baruch Ber was his face when he was learned Torah. His face would turn red, like a beet red. It would turn. Rabbi Chanan was a person that his mitzias, when there was an event that took place once, and Rabbi Chanan said, speaking. I'm sorry, there was a conference of rabbis, Rabbanim, Chashiv Rabbanim, and one Rav said that Torah is just like life. I mean, he raised his voice and he claimed that. So Baruch Ber protested on the spot, and he just did that. He banged on the table and said, Torah is not just like life. Torah is life. And he felt it with all the Ramach Yevorim Meshisagidim. Rabbi Chanan was a Kaddish, a Torah. Baruch Ber was a Kadoshim Utaharim. We're talking about Malachi Hasharis compared to what we are today. It sounds so arrogant, insulting, and just the opposite of the Eibishter's Ratzon Hashem to be able to make remarks about, well, I think Rab wasn't in touch with, this was in touch with reality of the world and this and that, whatever it may be. I don't think that's appropriate. I think one could say, listen, I don't understand what the Baruch Ber is saying. I feel that Rabbi Chanan makes sense to me, but I don't understand. That one could, Derech Eretz, you could say that. I don't understand. I don't understand what he says. But to dismiss anyone just with a hand movement, that's inappropriate when you talk about these kind of Gedolei Yisrael. So I think that's in order. When you have Gedolei Yisrael who radiate with this ethereal light that nobody else has in the world, like they really don't have it, just something special, sublime, and you look at them and you don't know how to, like, I mean, we saw the Skolli Rabbi Zachariah Levacha, even who was in our door, maybe a little before our door, you saw this kind of ethereal light that was coming. It was not just a standard person that learned Torah and was Oved Hashem. Something Hashem gave him, some kind of a zricha that came out of his panim, the parts of panim. The Gemara says, Elisha and Sukkah, kol sheyesh bar chen, if he has a look of chen in you, b'yadua sheyesh bar yirah shamayim, that he has yirah shamayim. So I just want to convey that first part of the message. And again, there are two different drachim. Shem Shlomo Hirsch has a very powerful derech. The most important thing was if we see somebody else has a different derech and follows Shem Shlomo Hirsch's derech, the way most people understand him, that working is an obligation and it's not just a secondary thing you should do, but it's a Weltanschauung that talks about the unification of man as a whole, individual. It unifies a person when he has Torah im derech eretz. And if we could look at that with great respect, not only at Rav Hirsch would have great nachas from us, but all the Gedolei Yisrael would have great nachas from us. We don't have to do that. We don't have to live that life. We could choose to live. But understand that there are many, many deists that believe that Parnasa is, first of all, obligation. That's, we hold halacha l'maisa. Rabbi Yaakov told me once, Rabbi Yaakov Tzaddik Levracha told me, that he's not sure that everybody who's in Kola should be in Kola. Not only because they're not meeting the obligations, but they're taking away money that perhaps could have been given to people who deserve to be in Kollel, and now are deprived because they've settled with the minimum because you have to divide it equally, the money for everybody. Obviously, if you give 2,000 people Kollel money and only 1,000 of them deserve to get it because they're really going to become something special, so if they could have gotten the second share of the other person, instead of living on $80 a week, they could live on $160 a week, and times 4, or maybe even more than that. So, I mean, obviously, we're losing people who Talmidei Chacham, because those Talmidei Chacham say, well, I can't live on $80 a week, and I have to, because everybody's getting Kollel money, so I have to go out and get a job. And we lose many Talmidei Chachamim. He told me he had this discussion for years with Rabbi Shnei Kotler, and maybe even with Rabbi. I don't know if he said Rabbi. I'm not sure, but I know he told me he had a discussion with the Shiva of Leib, Rabbi Shnei Kotler, Zechat Tzadik L'Avracha. So, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim. But let's keep it that way. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim, not just my own personal opinion. Divrei Elokim Chayim. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Leib Tropper.